Hello, my name is Alvaro Calzadilla. I am Associate Professor in Macroeconomic Modeling in the Institute for Sustainable Resources at the University College London. I am an economist and develop very detailed economic models to assess global, regional, and national policies and external shocks. My role in FutureDAMS is to contribute to the economic assessment of large-scale water infrastructure systems, considering its water, energy, food, and environmental interlinkages. Together with Mohamed Bashir and Victor Nekifor, in FutureDAMS we are using CGE models. This stands for Computable General Equilibrium Models. This type of models are very useful for an ex-ante assessment of policy interventions, as they simulate policy changes and trace the impacts on key economic variables, including income and expenditure flows of the different agents in the economy. CGE models combine economic theory and real economic data to derive the economy-wide impacts of different policies or shocks. So we look at the economic impacts across the agriculture, industry, and service sectors. In FutureDAMS, we are contributing to the Volta and Nile case studies, as well as to the integrated modeling framework. For the Volta River Basin, we have developed an investment-oriented CGE model that captures all stages related to the development of the buoy dam, the construction, the financing, and the operation. All these aspects are important as they have significant and different economic impacts. However, most of the literature only focuses on the operation phase of the power plant, that is, on the direct impacts such as electricity generation and irrigation water availability, leaving the indirect impacts such as impacts on the supply chain and induced effects such as income impacts unexplored. Our approach, therefore, explores the direct, indirect, and induced impacts of infrastructure investment across the project construction, financing, and operation. In this diagram, we can see that the investment-oriented CGE model has an explicit representation of the different economic flows associated to the construction, financing, and operation phase. The economic model is linked to a especially explicit biophysical system model, while the economy model determines the macroeconomic, sectoral, and household level impacts of large-scale infrastructure projects. The biophysical system model determines the changes in hydropower generation, considering hydrological uncertainty. These changes in hydropower generation and then transmitted to the CGE model as economic shocks to hydropower output. As an application of this framework, we explored the economic impacts of the buoy dam. The paper behind this analysis is under peer review. The buoy dam is located on the Volta River in Ghana. The Volta River has three main tributaries: the Black Volta, the White Volta, and the Oti River. The construction of the buoy dam started in 2009 and hydropower generation was commissioned in 2013 with a power generation capacity of 400 megawatts. The Akosombo Dam, located downstream from the buoy dam, is the largest hydropower plant in Ghana, with a power generation capacity of 1020 megawatts. Here we can see the main characteristics of the buoy dam according to the construction, financing, and operation phase. The buoy dam was built in 4 years and costed $622 million. The government financed its construction, getting a 20-year concessional loan for $270 million, a 12-year commercial loan for $292 million, and the remaining $60 million was financed from the government spending. A particular condition of the commercial loan is the agreement to export to China up to 40,000 tons of cocoa for 20 years at a fixed price. During the operation phase, we can see a gradual reduction in electricity generation from the Akosombo Dam and a gradual increase in electricity generation in the buoy dam. The economic impact of these different characteristics and conditions were captured by assessing 3 different scenarios and comparing them to a baseline simulation. The baseline simulation represents a situation assuming that the buoy dam had not been implemented. The electricity-only scenario replicates what is commonly done in the literature, that is, assessing the increase in hydropower production without considering the investment and finance needs. The loan scenario considers, in addition to the higher hydropower production, the project cost during the construction phase of the dam, which are covered by the 2 loans. The loans plus exports scenario is similar to the loans scenario but includes the cocoa exports over the 2010-2028 period. I would like to stress that in this analysis we do not include potential economic benefits of irrigation nor negative environmental and social impacts. These aspects are extremely important, but we are not capturing this because of our methodology. The results cover dynamic developments of key variables like GDP, employment, investment, sectoral production, and household income and consumption, among others. Here I will show you just one slide summarizing the results of the analysis. Here we can see the discounted cumulative GDP and the discounted cumulative real income of rural and urban households. The cumulative GDP impact in the electricity-only scenario is $766 million, larger than the initial value of the project, which costed $622 million, meaning an overall positive impact of the buoy dam. As we mentioned previously, this number reflects only the direct impacts which are commonly assessed by most of the literature. If we add the cost of financing the dam in the loans scenario, the GDP gains are reduced to $704 million. However, it is still larger than the cost of the dam. If in addition to the higher electricity production and the cost of financing the dam, we add the cocoa exports agreement, the impact on GDP is much larger. It reaches $1,289 million, reflecting the positive impact of the conditional loan on the agricultural sector and agricultural households. In fact, we can see that the cumulative real income effect is higher for rural households than for urban households. The largest difference between the 2 groups are obtained in the loan plus exports scenario, since the increase in agricultural output has a strong effect on the income of rural households. Here are some conclusions of this analysis. We couple a CGE model and a water system model to assess the direct, indirect, and induced impacts of infrastructure investment across the project construction, financing, and operation. The results demonstrate that the inclusion of the construction and financing phases, as well as the consideration of other macroeconomic drivers like factor supply, exchange rates, and public spending, changes both the cumulative value and the temporal evolution of the economic gains and losses of large infrastructure projects like the buoy dam. For instance, the inclusion of the financing conditions for the buoy dam leads to a 68% increase in mean discounted GDP gains. This increase is mainly driven by the additional economy-wide benefits of higher cocoa production. Therefore, we support the literature claiming that an economy-wide approach that goes beyond the quantification of the direct impacts of projects is appropriate for an ex-ante economic assessment of infrastructure investments. I will now talk briefly about the work that we are doing in the Eastern Nile. We have developed CGE models for Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt to assess the economic impacts of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, GERD. This implies assessing the economic impacts of the GERD construction, GERD financing, electricity generation, and electricity exports in Ethiopia. Assessing the impacts of hydropower generation, irrigation water and electricity imports in Sudan, and assessing the impacts on electricity generation and irrigation water in Egypt. This work focuses on the economic impacts of different filling rules of the GERD, which are computed accounting for hydropower production and irrigation water deficits calculated by a water balance model for the Eastern Nile. While the former analysis soft links a water balance model with 3 CGE models, the scheme presented here shows an integrated modeling framework where a monthly river system model of the Eastern Nile Basin is fully integrated to the CGE model of Egypt. In this framework, the river system model uses the changes in irrigation water demand, municipal water demand, electricity demand, and non-hydroelectricity generation capacity computed by the economic model to scale the corresponding water energy parameters in the river system model. The river system model then performs a 12-month simulation based on monthly river flow data and the modified water demands, electricity demands, and non-hydro capacity. The river system model then computes the fractions of annual irrigation and municipal water demands that can be met in addition to the annual hydro and non-hydroelectricity generation. In the next iteration, annual water supply fractions and electricity generation of the previous iteration are applied to the CGE model to compute new changes to annual water and electricity demands and non-hydroelectricity generation capacity relative to the initial values of the economy. The CGE and the river system model will pass a convergence test when the difference between the current and the previous iteration's values falls below certain convergence threshold. Then the results of the last iteration of the models will be considered a solution of the integrated framework for that particular year. We apply this framework to assess the impacts of the GERD filling and long-term operation on Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt. We show that flexible collaboration in managing the Nile, that is, removing constraints on minimum releases from the GERD when there is sufficient water in the high Aswan Dam or when the flows of the other 2 Eastern Nile tributaries are high, can ensure, if it is physically possible, the satisfaction of irrigation and municipal water consumers in Sudan and Egypt. Indeed, the results reveal that flexible filling and operation of the GERD increases electricity generation in Ethiopia, sustains Sudan's water consumption, decreases Egypt's irrigation and municipal water shortages, and enhances the resilience of Egypt's economy to hydrological uncertainty,